Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web series The Survivor Becomes the Dungeon. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 31. Ferodius' Point of View. Yes, please pay attention. You're the one who asked me to read you this month's summary, Regan admonished, light-heartedly, flashing a smirk at the man as he tapped the stack of papers into his other hand. Ferodius sighed a bit, his ash-grey feline ears twitching with annoyance before yawning loudly and leaning back into his seat. I know, Regan. I just can't help it. All of this paperwork is soul-draining. I'm half tempted to knock it off the desk, he mused mischievously as he glanced over to his right hand and friend. Regan shares Ferodius' mischievous mood for a moment before shaking his head and sitting on the edge of the desk. In any case, the new fertilizer and farming techniques we implemented earlier this year have more than tripled our yields compared to previous years. Our stores are full, and the abundance has driven a healthy jolt into the average populace. Ferodius flashes a fanged half-smile and glances over at Regan. Who knew just adding some extra stuff to the dirt and changing how we plant them would do so much? The answer was simple, and I wonder how we missed it. Regan nodded intently at that. With that in mind, reports show that with less of a need to work for sustenance, we have seen higher attendance to the school that was implemented last year. Outside of that, we're also seeing more people showing up to the public training yards, increasing our combat effectiveness of the average commoner and raising the overall quality of the mercenaries and guards that join or are recruited into their respective guilds and barracks. Ferodius listened intently, his left ear twitching thoughtfully before glancing at Regan. But are they happy? He asked, with a surprising amount of somberness. Regan quirked a brow curiously, glancing back at Ferodius before standing up off his desk and turning to face him. Yes, my lord, they're happy. He offered Ferodius a half-smile before flipping through the pages of the report until he found something. With what I mentioned earlier in mind, the average commoner is more confident in themselves and more willing to try new things, like schooling or other forms of education, to better themselves. Crimes of desperation are curtailed by the abundance which keeps even the remaining few slums contently fed. Neighborhood watches have been formed by commoners and have served to prevent and stop active crime, often before the gods show up to intervene. All in all, national pride is high, as people are happy to call this empire their home, Regan explained with a grin, though he realized something and continued. As for the recently annexed lands, I will admit there is tension. But between beneficial policies and the previously mentioned abundance, things are going remarkably smoother than predicted. Ferodius nodded intently, his tail distinctly lashing behind him through the hole in his comfortably padded workchair. All right, that's enough for the summary. I'll look it over later tonight after dinner, he said, waving a hand dismissively as he massaged his temples with his other hand. Regan nodded intently, a pointed ear seemingly twitching randomly, though he glanced at the door moments before a knock sounded. Looking at Ferodius for a moment, he looks back at the door again. Enter. In stepped one of the Imperial messengers, the harpy man taking a knee and lowering his head before offering an envelope in one hand out before him. Pardon the intrusion, your highness. I bring a letter from Mage REUpload. Once Regan took up the letter, the messenger stood, bowed, and hurried out as professionally as possible to get back to work. Looking over the letter, he held it out to Ferodius, who took it up, seemingly forgetting about the headache for a moment. Well, she's not dead. That's good news, Regan mused lightly. Oh, stop. Ferodius snickered, a toothy grin, as he cut the letter open and the claw before looking it over. Huh. Regan had been reviewing the summary for himself when he glanced over at Ferodius, curiously. Something the matter? Ferodius was silent for a bit as he considered the letter's contents before holding it out for Regan to read as well, which he did. A new dungeon core, young but powerful with sentient intelligence. Regan studied the letter intently before speaking up again. Brutal, but benevolent. He seems willing and open to cooperate with us against the theocracy and the hegemony. Regan stroked his chin as he looked over the letter once more before setting it down at his desk. What are you thinking? Ferodius' tail went still in contemplation before letting out a heavy sigh as he shook his head. I'm still thinking. For now, let's just wait for REUpload to return to us. Regan nodded sagely at Ferodius' words. Just then, both of their ears twitched as they heard a familiar set of steps approach. Ferodius flashed a bit of a smile in anticipation. A gentle knock sounded out from the door as Ferodius spoke up, this time with a smile evident in his voice. "Come in, darling." A good-looking young woman stepped inside, carrying a tray with a steaming mug and some sort of treat. "Good afternoon, my lord," she enthused cheerfully, being all formal for only the moment before dropping the act before closing the door as she came over to Ferodius' side, setting the tray down as a feline emperor took a deep breath of the scent and what his beloved had brought. Regan flashed a grin as he looked between the two and saw a chance to leave them alone. "If you'll excuse me, Empress Historietta, my lord, I have other matters to tend to." With that, he lowered his head before making his exit. Ferodius grinned as he nodded at Regan while he made his exit. He then looked over at Historietta and chuckled a bit. "You're never going to stop going into the kitchen, You're going to give Alina even more grey hairs," he mused mischievously to her. She snickered softly as she leaned in and kissed his forehead before looking down into his eyes with a chestnut gaze. "She can try and stop me all she wants. As long as the other maids keep coming to me for treats, I'll always have a way in," she mused affectionately while sitting on the arm of his chair. Ferodius's ears twitched with delight as the kiss before, as he looked down at the tray she brought. "Now, what have you made for me? Is this that matcha you've been talking about?" She beamed enthusiastically. "Yes, I finally found a good blend of green tea and made a satisfying matcha," she mentioned while sitting on the mug before him. "And these are some dark chocolate brownies made by crumbled bacon pieces. I know sweets aren't your thing, but I do believe you'll enjoy the bitter, savory taste of this treat," she explained, setting down a small plate before him as she used the other hand to run her fingers through his head fur gently and massage one of his ears. He shuddered under her touch and glanced up at her. "It smells fantastic." He gingerly takes up the mug, slowly taking a sip of the warm drink as it traveled through his body. He then takes a bite of the treat. The bitter edge complemented the savory surprise of the bacon, which was then complemented by the follow-up swig of tea. His tail curling as he enjoys the treat. "Another perfect delight, Tori," he practically purred to her as he busied himself with what was in front of him. She beamed some more as she savored her cooking. "By the way, green tea also works wonders for hair. A special blend with some oils can enrich your fur, making it even glossier and healthier. It's also good for skin. So all in all, it's good cosmetic treatment for men and women of many races," she explained while continuing to toy with his head fur. Her eyes wandered as she spotted a distinct letter amongst all the paperwork. His ears twitched under her touch, and he chewed up another bite of the brownie. "I see. Well, if you say so, I'll give it a try," he enthused warmly, though he glanced at her, having noticed that she was now murmuring under her breath, "What's the matter, my darling?" She blinked a few times as she was shaking something away before smiling a little at him and gesturing at the letter. Does that word mean anything to you?" Ferodius looked up at her curiously before licking his lips and looking at the letter again. "What word?" "But Maury, it's just the name of a newly discovered core," he answered as he looked up at her again. She hummed thoughtfully for a moment before deciding to confess. "Well, the reason I asked is because that sounds rather similar to some words in a dead language I'm aware of," she explained as Ferodius listened intently. "Essentially, the two words that make up that name are life and death," she said as Ferodius nodded slowly, sipping at the mug before looking over at the letter with a new appreciation. End of chapter. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, Lord Azrekahl, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon W.R.E, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.